Hey guys, Joe here. Thanks very much for joining me tonight. I'm here with a replay against Death Shadow aggro. This is a deck that has been getting increasingly popular over the last year or so in the modern format. I haven't played against it a ton of times, but I pretty much get the basics of how it operates. They try to lose tons of life through fetches and shocklands in order to get Death Shadow really big. So this guy, for those of you who are unfamiliar with, is a really amazing magic card design. 1 black mana for 13/13, which seems insane, but he has a really steep downside. Gets -X/-X, where X is your life total. So if you play this guy when you have 13 life, he enters the battlefield as a 0/0 and goes straight to the graveyard. If you play him when you have 12 life, he'll be a 1/1. If you play him when you have 1 life, he'll be a 12/12. And anywhere in between, 1 and 12, he'll be a different size creature. So again, fetches and shocks take tons of life. Mutagenic growth, they'll pay this Phyrexian cost, even if they have mana up to pay for it, just so that they can keep losing life. The strategy seems a little bit sketchy against Merfolk, because we can frequently be attacking with Island Walk for large chunks of damage. So if they choose to sort of shock themselves all the way down to 5 life, we can close them out pretty quickly from that point. So it looks like that's probably a keep on their side of things. We've got Death Shadow and a Wild Necatl to start pushing damage, including the mutagenic growth, to help them get their life total down. They'd prefer to have a couple more spells, but I think that's a keep over there. On my side, I've got 2 blue sources, a Mutavault, AEther Vial, and 1, 2, and 3 drop. Looks pretty good. The opponent's going to be on the play. He decides to keep, I decide to keep. He'll crack a Bloodstained Mire, getting an untapped Overgrown Tomb, and plays Wild Necatl. Alright, I draw another AEther Vial. That's pretty stinky. Play an island, play an AEther Vial. Opponent draws his 5th land. That's also pretty stinky. But he's going to crack a Windswept Heath, going all the way down to 14, fetching an untapped Sacred Foundry, so that Wild Necatl is fully powered right now. Getting in, I'll take 3. The opponent will take another 2 life to pump up the Wild Necatl, and I go all the way down to 15. For my turn, I draw another Island Walk Lord. Pretty solid. So after thinking about it for a little while, basically I was a little bit afraid for a moment about the untapped mana. The idea being that if I run out, a valuable Island Walk Lord, he can just easily Lightning Bolt it. But I'm pretty much onto this guy's plan at this point, really recklessly cracking fetches for untapped shocks and mutagenic growth, even though he had the mana up, tipped me off that he's on this Death Shadow plan. So this mana at this point doesn't necessarily represent anything, so I feel pretty comfortable running this Island Walk Lord out, especially since I have Cursecatcher backup. Even if I was afraid that they had the removal, I probably would have played my 2-drop here anyway, just because my hand is pretty well stocked at this point. But in the replay, we can see he didn't have any removal, and so playing the Lord out was the right call there. The opponent drew into another Wild Necatl, which is pretty solid. Plays that guy out pre-combat for some reason. He's going to play out another Bloodstained Mire, get another untapped Shockland, attacks for 3. I'll go from 15 to 12. The opponent goes to his end step, but that's a mistake. So he's going to back up, play Death Shadow, of course. That would be silly not to. This guy's going to enter the battlefield as a 4/4. Because he gets -X/-X, where X is his life total. So it's 13 -9, bringing him down to a 4/4. I'm going to Violin Cursecatcher. Opponent's got some pretty big dudes over there. And untap, draw, Spreading Seas. So that's interesting since I have all of these Island Walk guys. Let's think about the lines here. If I play the Spreading Seas now on the Sacred Foundry, I can AEther Vial in Lord of Atlantis, and swing for what? Sorry, I'm getting a little distracted here. I could swing for 6 with Island Walk, but then he's got these big guys coming back at me. And my Lord would only be a 3/3 as a blocker. I'd inevitably lose him to an attack. So that line doesn't seem super amazing. If I played the Spreading Seas, I could draw into another land that would let me activate Mutavault and swing for even more. I could swing for lethal if I drew a land after vialing in this other Lord. But he could be representing removal here. In the end, I think what the best line is going to be is to play out this Reejerey, make my guys 3/3s and attack. Try to lure this guy into some kind of block. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have removal at this point since he didn't play it last turn. If I could get him to block with the Death Shadow, I could of course then vial in a Lord and trade a Cursecatcher for the Death Shadow. Now, Cursecatcher is getting less and less useful as the opponent plays more and more lands out. His ability is not really going to be likely to counter anything. So after thinking about it a little bit, I am going to go ahead and play out that Merrow Reejerey and swing with the Cursecatcher. Now the opponent is going to ask to confirm whether it's a 3-3. I just go ahead and say yes, it is a 3-3. AEther Vial gets activated, and he did block with the Death Shadow. He took the bait, I guess, if you could call it that. But he drew into another Death Shadow, pretty solid. Plays that guy out. He's still a 4-4. I'm going through this with my opponent. He asks me to please, reflect the accurate power and toughness on my creatures. I'm pretty sure on Magic Online it automatically does this, like it'll indicate that my creatures are 4/4s, but if you're playing paper Magic, you're under no obligation to tell your opponent the size of your creatures. This guy says other Merfolk get +1/+1. So if you can think enough to play this game, you can say, okay, well, this guy's getting +1/+1, and this guy's getting +1/+1. This guy says other Merfolk get +1. This guy gets, and this guy gets. So you just figure out everybody's getting +2. All right, it's not very complicated. Some people get really confused by this stuff, though. So I learned to pick my battles on Cockatrice and not really argue about it. I just tell people, like, try to figure it out, please. I'll indicate it now, but the rules, don't say that I have to do that. All right, so the opponent's attacks have been effectively held up at this point. He feels the pressure here, as I mentioned at the beginning of the game. This is a pretty sketchy strategy against Merfolk, since we can often attack for big chunks of damage at a time. All right, so it looks like I drew a Wanderwine Hub this turn, which is a little bit awkward. I do play the playset of Wanderwine Hubs, and it rarely comes up. But in this case, I'd love to play Spreading Seas and attack with Mutavault. But as it stands, I don't have a Merfolk to reveal in my hand. If I play Spreading Seas and attack, if the opponent doesn't have any removal, then, of course, he's just going to take 12 damage with Island Walk and die. But if he does have Path to Exile in this single card left in his hand, if I attacked with these guys without Mutavault, then one of my Island Walk Lords would go away. This guy would get blocked and killed by Death Shadow, and Merrow Reejerey would still have Island Walk, but he would only be getting in for 3 at that point. However, if I play Spreading Seas now and draw either a different land or a Merfolk, I can reveal a Merfolk to Wanderwine Hub, play it untapped, activate the Mutavault, and then if the opponent has Path to Exile in that instance, and exiles one of my Island Walk Lords, yes, Lord of Atlantis will still eat it, but Reejerey will still be swinging unblockable for 3, and Mutavault will still be swinging unblockable for 4. So that would be 7, and the opponent is at 7. So really hoping to just draw. I mean, I have a ton of options, right? I mean, the only things that I could hit that wouldn't let me attack with Mutavault right now off of the Spreading Seas would be, I guess, Unsubstantiate, AEther Vial. I already got one of those in my hand. Unsubstantiate, AEther Vial, or Wanderwine Hub. Any other land or any Merfolk would do. So there goes the Spreading Seas. Oh, and he just scooped right away. So, all right, that was game 1. Let's go ahead to game 2, see how that one went. All right, looking at the opening hands. So I mentioned Unsubstantiate just a moment ago. I just started to test this card tonight. I'm pretty excited about it. I just took out both of my Dismembers and my single Echoing Truth and brought in 3 Unsubstantiates. I don't think that that's necessarily the correct number to play, but whenever you're testing a new card, it makes sense to just either play a full playset, if that might potentially be close to correct, or something near it, just because you want to be drawing the card, you want to be testing it in lots of different situations. If you only put 1 in the deck, then you're not going to draw it, you're not going to get to play it, and you'll never know if it's good or not. Ultimately, I might cut Unsubstantiate down to a singleton, but I can't really do that. I can't really know that that's the best until I've tried running more copies. So currently I've got 3 copies in the deck, and I'll keep you guys posted on how the testing goes. But having this card in my opening hand it makes me sort of more likely to want to keep it, because I really want to try this card out. So looking at the rest of the hand, I've got only 1 blue source and a Mutavault, so I'm really going to want to hit another blue source. But because I have this Unsubstantiate and I have the mana to cast it, I'm going to keep and just cross my fingers. I am on the draw, so I'm going to have a couple opportunities to hit that blue source. Looking at the opponent's hand, it's sort of the opposite of his last opening hand, where he had 4 lands. He's got no lands here. And we can see a little bit more about this strategy. They've got Monastery Swiftspear to get in for early damage. Sort of important for their strategy because Death Shadow can take a little while to actually get online, the creature itself. So they want to get the opponent's life total kind of low so that when Death Shadow gets out, he can just smash through everything. Temur Battle Rage pairs really, really well with Death Shadow because target creature gains double strike until the end of turn, and if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, then you get this ferocious trigger, I guess. It says that creature also gains trample until the end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. So let's see, Death Shadow, if he's like an 8/8, this card will give him double strike and trample, which is quite frightening. So the opponent has all the pieces. He's got Swiftspear, Wild and Cattle, Death Shadow, all great creatures, push a lot of damage with Battle Rage, Mutagenic Growth, Gitaxian Probe, all of these giving lots of prowess triggers. Become Immense, just making all the creatures super gigantic. Fortunately, can't really cast anything. It would be really, really sketchy to keep with just a Gitaxian Probe and try to hit a land off of that. So the opponent mulligans down to 3 lands and 1 creature with 2 Mutagenic Growths. It's going to be pretty easy to get his life total low here, but with only this 1 creature, it looks pretty sketchy. Alright, so I kept, and the opponent kept, and seemed to like what he saw on the top of his library. He's going to open with Windswept Heath into Stomping Ground, going down to 17, playing Wild and the Cattle. So I drew an island on my first draw step, which was incredible, because that's exactly what I wanted. Without a 1-drop, I'll just throw out the Wanderwine Hub tapped. I don't think the playing an untapped blue source is going to prevent the opponent from doing anything this turn. Okay, all the way down to 14 already, cracking another fetch for a shock. So right now he gets the Sacred Foundry, which makes sense because you want to make Wild and the Cattle big. So he's going to swing for 3, going down to 17. But we see that he drew this Death Shadow. That was the card that he scryed. Unfortunately, having played that fetch land and getting a Sacred Foundry, he doesn't have black mana in it right now. I don't think he quite realized what he was doing. So he's going to double Mutagenic Growth, going all the way down to 10 from 14. Wild and Cattle then goes up to 7/7. I took 7 damage, going from 20 all the way down to 13. I'm going to have to tell the opponent here that he can't actually cast Death Shadow. I asked him, if you want to, you can go get Godless Shrine or something, but apparently he has it in his hand. He could have gotten Overgrown Tomb, in which case Wild and the Cattle would just be a 2/2. Probably would have been the best play since he does want to get Death Shadow out on the board. But he doesn't take, I offer just whatever. Like, play the Godless Shrine, I don't care. But he just passes the turn. I draw another blue source. Maybe it's getting to be the point of too much of a good thing. Cast Harbinger. So, Harbinger is pretty much always our best turn 2 play if the opponent controls a tapped creature. Just the tempo swing is so big. The opponent's not going to be able to attack with this guy next turn. He's going to have to devote more mana to replay him and then wait a turn to attack again. Lightning Bolt is a good draw there for the opponent. He's going to be able to pick off whatever my best creature is. Another untapped Shockland, going all the way down to 8. Here's the Wild and the Cattle again, and then here is the Death Shadow. The opponent has mana for Lightning Bolt. He can leave it up, but he chooses not to. For whatever reason, he's just going to kill the Harbinger right now. A little bit poor, I think. He could think that I'm playing Dispels, but he has no evidence for that. I haven't shown him any counterspells yet. Drew another Harbinger, I think, this turn. Again, a great card against any creature-based deck. Had to think a bit this turn. I have so many options. I could just throw out an Island Walk Lord. Harbinger is not very good right now because these guys are untapped. Unsubstantiate is pretty good, but it keeps me on the back foot because the opponent can just play out the creature again. So I think that Spreading Seas is going to be the best option here. The opponent is currently out of cards with only 1 black source. If I can take him off of black, if the opponent next turn doesn't draw another black source, I can take this damage. It's 8 currently. If he plays another fetch into a shock, he'll probably have access to black again. Not the biggest deal in the world. I just need to slow down his clock a little bit. Fetch into shock would bring his life total down to 5, making Death Shadow an 8/8. These guys swinging, then for 11, I'd be at 2. I'd still get another turn. So I think taking him off black and setting up the next turn when I'll have 4 mana, access to Harbinger of the Tides and Unsubstantiate, and my Island Walk Lords is going to be the best bet, I think, here. So fast forwarding here, I'm going to cast Spreading Seas after playing the Mutavault. Normally I'll wait until after drawing my card to play my land drop, but in this case I wanted to leave blue mana up in case I drew into a Cursecatcher. As it turned out, I drew into another land. And I also wanted to play Mutavault just because, you know, that guy gives me options if I need to block or if I want to attack next turn. If the opponent, you know, goes all the way down to 3 or something like that, then I can just play a single Lord and swing for lethal. Looks like the opponent drew a land. He's going to crack it, go down to 5, as I predicted. Well, a 7 so far, but I expect, yeah, he's going to get an untapped shock land and go down to 5. Death Shadow, incorrectly marked as a 7/7. That's why we don't manually mark our creatures. All right. 8 plus 3, 11. I go all the way down to 2, again, as I predicted. Draw a Reejerey. I'm going to play my Wanderwine Hub here, and Harbinger is an easy choice for the first play of the turn. I'm going to bounce the big guy. Death Shadow will go back to the opponent's hand. And then need to think just for a second. I think that passing with Unsubstantiate is going to be the best here. Actually, it's kind of my only option. So the opponent plays out Death Shadow again, and he's going to attack with the Wild and the Cattle into my 2/2. And then at that point, I had the choice between just bouncing with Unsubstantiate or double blocking with Mutavault and Harbinger. If I double block, I take out the 3/3, and let's say that he chose to kill the Mutavault. I'd have the Harbinger next turn, and I can play my island, play 2 Island Walk Lords as 3/3s, and Harbinger can swing with Island Walk for 4. The opponent would go down to 1 and be left only with his Death Shadow. I could chump the Death Shadow with one of my Lords, and with him at 1, probably swing for lethal the next turn, but that gives him, I think, more chances to top deck like a Lightning Bolt and close the game out quickly. The other option is if I just bounce the Wild and the Cattle, next turn, as long as he doesn't have removal in his hand, I can just play an Island Walk Lord, activate Mutavault, and get in for 6 unblockable for lethal. I don't really want to mess around at this point. I don't know what this card is in the opponent's hand, and if it's a Path to Exile, then I'm pretty much wrecked. I think the opponent only plays, I think this deck typically just plays Lightning Bolts. I don't think that they, at least in the main board, don't play Path to Exile, but I wouldn't put it past them to run it in the sideboard. All right. So after speaking through all that, I have to fast forward through all of this air silence here. I really thought it through, the whole double block situation versus bouncing, and in the end, bouncing is the better option, I think. Then as long as the opponent doesn't have a Path to Exile, I'm going to be able to swing for lethal with Island Walk. So there, play an island out, play the Lord of Atlantis, activate Mutavault, and I don't think the opponent at this point quite realizes that he's done. Thinks about blocks, indicates blocks, but I remind him that I have Island Walk, and when he figures it out, he says, "Oh, good game." All right, so that was the match. It was pretty quick. As I mentioned, it's a pretty sketchy strategy against Merfolk. We're aggressive as well, often unblockable, and when you go solo with your own life total, you're just asking for trouble against Merfolk. Please share your comments. Let me know what you think of the matchup, if you have any experience with it, whether you think it's positive or negative, favorable or unfavorable. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. And yeah, that's about it. Oh, if you guys haven't checked this out, in the comments, sorry, not in the comments, but in the description in each video, I put my deck list and my sideboarding strategy for each matchup if you guys want to check that out. Yeah, so that's it. I'll see you next time. Thanks again. Bye-bye.